Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the board. I actually have two items for you this afternoon. The first is to give you, I just want to take an opportunity to update you on the Columbia Pike Transit Initiative. The Columbia Pike Transit Initiative is a joint project between Arlington and Fairfax to provide high-quality, high-capacity transit service along Columbia Pike between the Pentagon, Pentagon City, and Arlington County, and the Skyline area in Fairfax County. This initiative is part of the county's overall effort to transform the Pike into a more walkable urban main street. It's also part of the county's vision to build on the existing transportation systems, extending its reach and offering more travel options to sustainably manage the growth. In 2006, following a local alternatives analysis, the Arlington and Fairfax boards endorsed the modified streetcar alternative for Columbia Pike. As part of their effort to qualify for federal funding for this project under the Federal Transportation Administration New Starts, Small Starts program, Arlington County and Fairfax County have compiled a federal alternatives analysis and environmental analysis. The official comment period for the completion of this AAEA for the Columbia Pike Transit Initiatives goes from today, May 22nd, through June 21st, 2012. We're going to hold two public meetings. The first of these meetings is Wednesday, June 6th at Arlington Patrick's Henry Elementary School in the cafeteria gymnasium, and that's at 701 South Highland Street in Arlington. The second will be Thursday, June 7th in the Fairfax location at the Goodwin House Bailey's Crossroads Auditorium at 3440 South Jefferson Street in Falls Church. Written comments can also be submitted to the following address: Columbia Pike Transit Initiative, P.O. Box 3915, Oakton, Virginia 22124, or by email to info@piketransit.com. After the public comment period is completed, the document will be brought forward to our county board and to the Fairfax board for review and approval for submissions to the Federal Transit Authority. So that just gives you an update of where we are on that particular item. My second item is a much more fun item in the sense that we have recently completed our third resident satisfaction survey. We commissioned our first survey in 2004. We did our second one in 2008, and we just have the results for 2012. These surveys give us an opportunity to gain better understanding of what's going on and how the community sees things, and it helps us get an understanding of what's important to our residents and how and well we're doing with the meeting community expectations. So it's 2012, and I'm very excited to bring you the results. The survey results are good. With us today is Chris Tatum, who you may remember from ETC Institute. Chris is one of the nation's leading authorities on the development of qualitative and quantitative customer satisfaction research for state and local governments. During the past 10 years, he has designed and implemented customer satisfaction surveys, assessments for more than 500 government agencies in 41 states. Chris will share with us the results of our 2012 Resident Satisfaction Survey. So with that, I will turn it over to Chris.
Great.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to be back. I see a few familiar faces, and in fact, a few of you actually worked with me to develop the very first survey. So it's great to be able to come back today and share with you the findings. What I'm going to do today is walk through some of the high-level findings. There's obviously a lot of information in this report. My goal is so that you'll be aware of what's there, so when it comes time to make decisions, you'll be available or be aware of what information is available. I also want to give you a sense so that you can have confidence that the data is actually reliable. And I'll go through a little bit of the methodology, but I'm going to focus mainly on the high-level findings. As the county manager mentioned, our firm specializes in working with local governments. This is just our GWIZ map that shows that we've surveyed over 1.5 million people across the United States in the past 6 years. When I first worked with you, we had conducted surveys in fewer than 100 communities. It's now well over 500 communities. We also do our own national research. Each year we administer a survey to more than 4,000 U.S. residents. So I'm going to make a number of comments during the presentation about how you stack up against others. I'll comment on national trends, and this is the basis for my comments. For today, I'm going to briefly walk through the purpose and methodology, just so you know how the survey was conducted and why. Then I'm going to give you what I like to call my bottom line up front, just in case we go through a lot of slides, you'll remember what the key points are, and then I'll tell you how I got there and then wrap things up. As far as the overall purpose, back in 2004, I think one of the challenges at the time for the county was to really get an objective assessment for how well you're delivering services. What I've seen with the hundreds of communities that I've worked with is citizens usually only contact their county for two reasons. One, services don't meet expectations, or two, they want to change the service. As a result, most of your public involvement processes are dominated by people who aren't happy or they want to change things. So special interest and unhappy citizens tend to be the ones you hear from the most. You don't hear from those who actually like things. You might even ask yourself, how often do you call the Department of Transportation and others every time you drive down a new highway? You all may because of your position, but most people just don't give feedback. As a result, without a tool like this, you may not know what residents expect. You may not know how expectations are changing, which makes it difficult to prioritize your investments. The county is to be commended now that you've done this 3 times. You really do have some good longitudinal history about how you've responded to citizen needs and gives you a window as to what the priorities, how they're emerging over time. As far as the methodology for the survey, the overall process was similar to what we've done in previous years. We selected 3,600 households at random from the entire county. We mailed them a survey. We then gave them 3 options for responding, either online, by mail, or over the phone, and you can see the numbers of folks that responded are listed in the screen in front of you. A total of 1,306 residents responded to the survey. We controlled the online responses by requiring people to submit their address, and that way we were able to match the people who responded online to the original sample. Other people responded online as well, and we have a separate data which we're calling our special interest group, and we'll share that with the county as well. The overall length of the survey is now 22 or nearly 22 minutes. It's the longest survey of this kind that we administer. The only reason we're able to administer it here is because your community is very engaged. In fact, I'm surprised that we get such a tremendous response rate, and I think it has a lot to do with the community's view of local government. I think the local folks in this community believe you actually listen to them. They believe it's worth the time because there are no other places around the country that we administer a survey that has this many questions. So I think it's really to be commended on the fact that you listen to what your residents say. The other thing I want to share with you is the home address of the respondents is geocoded, and while we keep the address out of the final database, it lets us make maps that let you see how people in different parts of the county rate different services. Sharing those maps in depth with your staff, and I'll just have a couple in today's presentation. But overall, we felt very good about the composition of the sample, both demographically. We looked at things like the racial composition of respondents, and we compared it to the recent census estimate, and our sample pretty much mirrors the census in a variety of areas such as whiteness. The percentage of Hispanic and Latino respondents is pretty much right on target. Black and African American respondents, Asian and Pacific Islander respondents, other things like age, et cetera, were also all checked. In addition, we reviewed the geographic distribution of respondents, and you can see from this map, the red dots show where people live who responded to the survey, and we generally have all of the residential areas in the county covered. We didn't get any respondents from those 2 empty areas to the right, to both the cemetery and the Oregon National Airport, so we're glad they weren't represented. But you will see them when we do shade them. They are part of census block groups, so they do get shaded, but just remember it's really the people who live next to those areas whose opinions were included. As far as the major findings, as you see when you look at the results of the survey, you'll find one, that residents of this county have an extremely positive perception of the community and the local government. In fact, they're among the very best that I've seen. I'd certainly rank you in the top 5% of all communities across the country. Secondly, the overall perception of the overall quality of county services is fairly even throughout the county. Although there are some differences by services, for the most part, residents throughout the county give the county very high marks, and you'll see that on one of the maps that I'm going to show you. Third is that during the past 8 years, most communities have gone in a negative direction. You actually stayed the same or improved in over 60 of the 92 areas that were assessed on the survey. In addition, your overall satisfaction rating went from 87 to 89, which may not seem significant, but during that same period, the national average dropped from 62 to 57. Much of that's been caused by the recession. What that means is when I presented to you in 2008, you ranked a phenomenal 25% above the national average. Now you rank 32 percentage points above the national average. Clearly one of the best performing communities around. Finally, to stay there, we took a look at what the priorities are for the community, and improvements to streets are one of the top priorities, and I'll walk you through how we got there in just a little bit. As far as the positive perceptions that residents have of the county, we have a number of what we call kind of strategic indicators to review the health of a community. What's shown on this list in the scale we use is a 5-point scale. 4s and 5s are positive ratings. 1s and 2s are negative or dissatisfied ratings. People don't actually respond neutral. They actually give a rating of 3 on a 5-point scale. We classify it as a neutral rating, and typically through focus group research, most of the people who are in that category are people who think they know what's going on, but they haven't had a real strong experience either positively or negatively. The reason they're important is they're the groups that's most easily impacted by communication and education. In other words, those are the folks who might read a story and suddenly believe, hey, the county's actually doing something I didn't know about, and they go from being a 3 to a 4. You can't make people who are negative positive, but you can make those who are neutral positive with good information and good communication. What you'll see on this map or this chart in front of you is that the overall intensity of the responses, particularly with regard to things like quality of services, image, quality of life, schools, we have over 30% of the respondents giving you a 5 on a 5-point scale. What that tells me is there's a lot of brand equity in the brand of Arlington County. People feel very good about this because they give a rating of 5. In most communities, we only see about 8 to 15% of respondents give an intense rating of 5, and you're having more than double that on several of the key indicators. In addition, we also take a look at how many folks are dissatisfied with the overall quality of county services. And if you look at the third item down, only 2% of the respondents surveyed were negative when it comes to the overall perception of county services. Compare that to 89% giving positive ratings. I've been telling staff for every person that calls in that says the overall quality of services is terrible, they should remember there's nearly 45 people in this county that actually feel really good about the way the county delivers its services. In addition, another key indicator I look at is how the value received for taxes, which is the fourth from the bottom. And you'll see there is more dissatisfaction. 15% of the residents gave negative ratings, but 63% gave positive ratings. It's over a 4-to-1 ratio. In addition, how well you are managing growth was one of the top issues when we first did the survey back in 2004, and you'll see that the dissatisfaction has been tremendously decreased, and I'll show you that in just a little bit. A couple new questions we've added this time have to do with the transparency of decision-making and the overall efforts to engage the public in decision-making. And you first might look at this chart and say, wow, that's not very good. There's more dissatisfaction there. What I did to kind of help you interpret this is I took a look at other communities. All the other communities that asked that question in the first place are high-performing communities. Your typical community does not ask those questions. The likes of the communities I looked at were places like Tempe, Austin, Texas, Naperville, Illinois, Overland Park, Kansas, and others, and I compared your ratings to theirs. And we found when it comes to your efforts to engage the public, you rated 8% above the average of those other high-performing communities. And when it comes to the overall perception of the transparency of your decision-making process, you rated 9% above those other high-performing communities. So you're certainly doing something right. Even though the ratings are a little bit lower, people naturally complain about those issues, and when you put it into context, you're doing very, very good. In addition, I know one of the efforts that you're looking at is trying to make sure Hispanics and people who speak Spanish are well represented in the county and provided quality service as well. And you'll notice we compared the overall satisfaction rating for county services among Hispanics to all other groups, and they were essentially equal. And of those who responded to the survey in Spanish, we had 112 respondents who did the survey in Spanish. They were slightly more satisfied, actually 91% compared to 89% for all respondents. So again, the overall positive perception exists among pretty much all groups in the county. In addition, we had respondents assess the overall quality of major categories of service delivery. What you'll see on this chart, everything from fire to police on down to traffic flow has been rated on that same scale, and there's very, very little dissatisfaction. The only areas you see significant levels of satisfaction are with county streets and traffic flow, which are 25% and 23% respectively. But I do want to point out, though, that sometimes people say there's always lots of cranky people out in the community. Look at fire, basically 0%. Of 1,306 people we called, only a couple gave dissatisfied responses. You're doing great. And when it comes to the intensity of your positive ratings, in other words, that brand equity, take a look at library, police, parks, fire, emergency preparedness, and your arts and cultural programs all have 30% or more of the respondents giving you a 5 on a 5-point scale. So you're certainly going to be commended in several areas. When it comes to how well you're delivering the services across the county, I'm not going to show you a lot of maps, but I did want to share with you the overall satisfaction map. What this map shows you by census block group, and if you're not familiar with a census block group, it's an area typically a little bigger than a neighborhood, smaller than a zip code. We've shaded the mean satisfaction rating for each census block group by one of those colors shown in the legend. What rarely happens in any community is to have the entire city or county in blue. There's usually at least some areas that are off-white. Typically, many areas may be in orange or even red. The entire county of Arlington County is in blue. You're doing a great job making sure that the high levels of service are provided equitably in all areas. The third major finding is how you're moving. And clearly from the survey results, you're moving in the right direction. These are those same key indicators. Arrows going up or down indicate whether or not there was a statistically significant shift of 3% or more since 2008. And you'll see quality of life, image, public schools, inclusiveness of the community, and how well you're managing growth have all increased significantly. I want to highlight the managing growth issue because that was one of your top issues back in 2004, and it's improved 11 points over the last 8 years. And although it's not flagged, if you see the quality of services, which is third from the top, you've seen a steady increase in your overall satisfaction rating from 86 to 89. And during the last 4 years, as I mentioned, the national average actually dropped 5 points, and you went up 2 points. In addition, value for taxes, which has also been a very sensitive issue in most communities, you see a stair-stepped up from 59% in 2004. It's now at a high of 63%. When we look at some of the specific services that were assessed, most have stayed about the same since the last survey. We've seen significant improvement in fire and emergency medical services, also with the county's stormwater runoff system. 3 areas had borderline significant decreases. You see communication, human services, and traffic flow were all decreased by 4 percentage points. The only area that really had a significant reduction involved county streets, which dropped 9 points from 60 to 51, which is one of the reasons it's emerging as a more significant issue. Interestingly, on the human services issue, although the overall rating decreased, most of the sub-areas that were assessed improved. In fact, many increased significantly, which suggests the perception about the issue as a whole nationwide because of the recession may be causing people to be more sensitive about the overall issue, but when they actually assessed specific services and they looked at those, they thought you were doing better. When it comes to perceptions of safety, you'll see that all areas of safety showed improvement. 3 of the 4 areas showed significant improvement, particularly commercial retail areas at night was up 7 points since 2008, and you can see neighborhood perceptions of safety in neighborhoods was up 6 points from 2008. When it comes to utility services, you can also see that all areas showed improvement. In fact, 4 of the 5 areas showed significant improvement. The most improvement you can see was in curbside recycling, which has gone up 9 points from 81 to 90%. Just putting that in perspective, that means 9 out of every 10 people in this county who have an opinion about curbside recycling give positive ratings. There's almost no dissatisfaction with that service, and that's a difficult service to roll out right, and many communities have very big, significant challenges delivering recycling services. When it comes to public safety, you'll again see a number of arrows pointing up: fire protection, emergency medical services, how quickly public safety personnel respond, your efforts to prevent crime, and the enforcement of local traffic laws all showed significant improvement. A couple things I want to highlight on this chart is one with the local traffic law enforcement. You'll notice it went up significantly. It went up at the same time perceptions of traffic flow went down. That almost never happens. Typically, when people are more concerned about traffic flow, they rate enforcement of traffic laws lower because they get upset that people aren't getting ticketed or they're driving through neighborhoods recklessly. So the fact that you went up 4 points when traffic flow went down means your police folks are really doing something right with regard to the enforcement of the traffic laws. In addition, you can see crime prevention, which was one of the top issues when we did the last survey, actually went up 13 points. It's my understanding you've done some community policing and some other initiatives, and they're clearly paying off. That's the most significant improvement I've seen in that area for any community ever. And to do that in such a short period of time really shows me that you're a model for letting your community feel that you're doing the right things when it comes to crime prevention. In addition, you'll see how quickly public safety personnel respond. I'm going to talk to that. You set a new high in that area, which I'll address in just a minute. On the Parks and Recreation side of the house, you'll see pretty much every area has improved. In fact, if you look back to 2004, what's interesting is from 2004 to 2008, you see substantial improvements in your park or your outdoor issues. You'll see maintenance of parks went from 73 to 75. You see walking and biking trails as stair-stepped improvements over the past couple of years. Your outdoor athletic fields have gone from 65 to 78. More recently, you'll see a number of the significant improvements have to do with programming and facilities. You'll see your indoor swimming pools gone up 18 percentage points from 48% to 68%. So you're clearly investing in the right way and meeting resident expectations in this area. When it comes to customer service, you'll see that all the areas have remained very high. There was actually a significant improvement in the courtesy and professionalism of your employees. One of the slides I don't have in here, but I find very interesting, is how your residents are contacting the county. In 2004, only about 1 in 5 residents were contacting the county by email. Now it's up to about 40%, it's nearly doubled. And so your ability to respond to those inquiries by email can potentially pose significant challenges on your customer service ratings. If people don't respond nicely or they say the wrong thing when they write, they don't write well, that can all give a negative impression. And the fact that your ratings continue to go up shows me you've handled the transition from having verbal and face-to-face contact to more electronic contact extremely well. When it comes to transportation issues, you can see generally the results are better. Overall perceptions of metro service in the county have decreased. Otherwise, biking trails and your issues to invest in pedestrian safety have shown significant improvements. You see pedestrian safety was flagged as a big issue back in 2004, and it's gone from 50 to 59%. And you can also see that your own public transit system, ART's, gone from 63 to 68% since the last survey. On the code enforcement side of the house, your perceptions of enforcement of external maintenance of both business and residential property have held steady, but the 2 areas that were most important in the last survey have actually shown significant improvement, that being noise regulation enforcement and construction site conditions. And you might see a theme here, as many of the issues that were top priorities in 2008 are the areas that you've seen some of the most significant improvement. That really shows me you've invested in the right areas and emphasized your work and the things that residents cared the most about. Here's Health and Human Services. Again, the overall rating decreased slightly, but if you look at each of the subsets that were assessed, there have been a number of significant improvements. Everything from your services to seniors, school health programs, services for persons with disabilities, and the availability of services for persons on low or fixed income all went up significantly. You'll notice that affordable housing, which is going to be one of the top issues in this category, went up slightly from 41 to 43%, but residents are even more concerned about that, which isn't unusual given the pricing of housing in this area. Now, those are most of the positives. Last couple of slides are where we've seen some opportunities or where there's some opportunities for improvement. The first one's environmental services. You see most areas have stayed about the same, but 2 areas saw significant decreases, or 4 areas, but there are really two issues. The first is maintenance of major streets. You can see that that went from 66 to 57%, a 9-point decrease, and perceptions of street maintenance in neighborhoods has fallen 7 points. And you can also see snow removal, both overall on the major streets and in neighborhoods, also declined. The difference is the snow removal ratings are still better now than they were in 2004. The maintenance ratings are now both lower than they were in 2004, which is, I think, one of the reasons they're of greater concern. In addition, library services, I know you had some cutbacks with hours, and you can see some of the impact that that had. Satisfaction library hours dropped from 80 to 66%. But even though you decreased your investment in some of these specific areas of library service, as I showed you before, the overall satisfaction rating for libraries, which was back here on this first page, actually stayed the same or about the same. If you take a look at it, it's the 4th one from the top, actually just decreased from 86 to 85. So even though there were some specific areas that declined rather dramatically, overall the ratings held steady despite some of the cuts in the hours. As far as how you stack up to other communities, some of these won't be a surprise since I've already mentioned them several times, but the one that really stands out to me on this chart is you'll see in blue is Arlington County, the U.S. average is in red. Look at the overall quality of county services provided by the county at 89% compared to 57%. That 32-point gap is not just statistically significant, it's phenomenally different. I don't know if that's statistically a proper term, but you just don't see that big of a gap hardly ever. In fact, to have 9 out of 10 residents give you positive ratings is just really incredible. You're doing something right. How you're managing growth, the value for taxes, the image, quality of life, all rate significantly above other communities. When it comes to how well you're delivering major categories of services, you can see the number of blue arrows is quite dominant on this chart. Almost every area rated is significantly better than other communities. The one exception is traffic flow, but again, being in the metropolitan DC area, that doesn't surprise me at all. You will see, though, County Streets still rates above most other communities, but you've lost your gap. When you did the survey last time, you were double digits above the national average. Now you're just 5 points above the national average. And I do want to highlight a couple. Your emergency preparedness is 17 points above the national average. Parks and Recreation, 16 points above the national average. Your customer service is 17 points above the national average. And I certainly should highlight communication, which you are clearly doing extremely well, is 22 points above the national average. How you're keeping folks informed and getting them involved with your processes is clearly, you're setting the standard in that area. When it comes to perceptions of safety, you can see all areas rate significantly above other communities, particularly with regard to people's perceptions of safety in their neighborhoods at night. Environmental services, you can see most areas rate significantly above, but now your county streets and neighborhood streets, which have both dropped significantly since 2008, actually rate slightly below the national average. When it comes to public safety, you'll see that the overall perceptions of crime prevention, which shot up 13 points from the last survey, were slightly above the national average before. Now you're setting the standard. And I really want to highlight your ability to respond quickly, which is the third item there at 89% compared to a national average of 75. And the reason I want to highlight it is because we do hundreds of surveys, and I rarely change the scale, the top ends. What this shows you is the best and worst rated community in our database. And if you take a look how quickly public safety personnel respond, there's a little orange dot, which is your rating, and it's at 89. And that's a new high. So your ability to respond, even though you have traffic flow issues, is really to be commended. It's very rare to see response times this high, particularly to be able to set a new standard when you have challenges with traffic flow. And you can see crime prevention has gone from being just a little above average to near the very best in our database. Parks and Recreation, all areas were significantly above the national average. Your pools went from being a little above average to now setting the standard. Your walking and biking trails also clearly set the standard. Your customer service, there's clearly a culture here that's responsive to resident needs, and you can see that by the high ratings compared to the national average. So all in all, you're clearly in almost every category we assess, not just above the national average, but you're setting the standard in many. And as I said, you should be really pleased with the fact that your response times are perceived to be so favorable when people have concerns about traffic flow. That's just really incredible. It means you're doing something right, not only delivering the service, but educating people about your ability to respond. Last thing I want to share with you is, well, what do you do next? How do you remain the top performer or one of the best communities in the country? The way you do it is you take a look at not only how well you're currently doing it, but what do residents think are the priorities as you move forward. What we asked residents was to rate the importance of each of the services that were assessed, and we actually did this for 9 different categories. I'm going to only share you the overall ratings today, but you'll see maintenance of county streets is the #1 priority to residents for future investment. They think it's the #1 area to improve. It's actually increased. Last time we did the survey, traffic flow was the #1 issue. You can then see as you go down the list the relative ranking of the other items. And this doesn't mean that fire, which you see it near the bottom, is not important to residents. But right now, given the current level of service and the fact that really no one is dissatisfied, your ability to enhance resident satisfaction by investing in fire is very minimal. In other words, this is really to help you figure out if you want to enhance or sustain overall levels of satisfaction at high levels, where should you go? And the way we get there is we take a look at both the importance and the satisfaction rating. What you see here is we use a formula, and we've set up these thresholds based on our experience over the past several years. But we take as the importance times 1 minus the satisfaction, and then we give you the IS rating. And the reason we do that is if the importance is 0 and nobody cares, you could invest $1 billion in the service and it would make no difference to the residents. On the other hand, if 100% of your residents are currently satisfied, you could also invest heavily and it wouldn't increase their overall level of satisfaction. If you're trying to increase your level of satisfaction, the best thing to do is to target areas that are really important where your overall performance is not as good. And you can see the two issues that rise to the top, the highest being county streets, the second being traffic flow. Human services is a distant third. The other items that are in the medium priority doesn't mean they're not important, but your investments in there won't give you the return on satisfaction rating that you would see in streets and traffic flow issues. If there's an item that's listed in the medium priority that is very important for you to invest in, one of the strategies we encourage is education, because residents may not know that you need a new fire station, or they may not know that you need 6 more police officers, those sorts of things. And if you invest in those and residents don't think they're important, sometimes you can get a disconnect and they don't think you're investing in the right areas. This is for folks who are left-brained. If you actually are more right-brained and like visual, this is for you. It's the same information. We've simply plotted from left to right the importance. From bottom to top is the satisfaction, and what you find in the bottom right quadrant are areas that are more important than average, where the overall ratings are lower, and you can see those same 3 items: maintenance of county streets, traffic flow, and human services are the top 3 issues for potential improvement. In addition, I put together this matrix, which is a little complicated, but I thought you might be interested just how things have changed since 2008. So what you'll see in the left are the major categories for which we did this analysis. You see Parks and Recreation, Public Safety, and so forth. And the items in the top area that are highlighted in green under substantial progress are areas that you've really made tremendous improvement in the area that residents thought were most important. You see, when we did the last survey, indoor pools were the top Parks and Recreation issue. Overall satisfaction increased 18%. So as a result, indoor pools have gone from the 1st to the 8th highest priority. And today, preserving natural areas is the #1 issue in Parks and Recreation. On crime prevention, it's increased 13 percentage points and has actually been downgraded from a high to a medium priority. And traffic laws, which are still a medium priority, are actually the highest issue in public safety. And then on human services, providing services for persons with low and fixed income has actually increased 8%, but it's been downgraded from a high to medium priority because of the improvement in satisfaction. And today, preserving affordable housing is the top issue within human services. Other items which have pretty much stayed the same by category for code enforcement, enforcement of noise regulations is still the top priority, even though we've seen improvement in the overall satisfaction rating of 5%. Drinking water is still the top issue among utilities, even though we saw a slight improvement in the satisfaction rating. And the issue related to your traffic calming measures has decreased slightly, but it's still a big sensitivity area to take a look at. As far as the emerging issues, county streets are the biggest one. We saw a decrease of 9%, but the overall priority residents placed on it has gone up rather substantially, which is the reason you see at the bottom of the sheet, management of traffic flow used to be the top overall priority. It's now become maintenance of city streets or county streets. Some of the other findings that we found have to do with ways to get information to residents. One of the things that you'll notice is that the county newsletter and the county website are 2 of the top 3 sources. There's not a better position to be in as a community than to actually be the creators of the top sources of information that people use. It allows you to provide the information that residents need, and it allows you to make sure the information about issues that are important to residents can go out in the proper way. You'll see that there's a number of other sources that are used, a couple of which I thought were somewhat interesting is you'll see your media blogs. 15% is significantly higher than most other communities. Among people who have lived in the county less than 5 years, almost 1 in 4 are using your online media blogs. So your ability to reach people through the citizen and county websites is tremendous, but there are a wide range of sources that people are using. The other thing I found very interesting is just the tech-savvy nature of your community. 62% have sent a text in the last week, 89% have sent an email, which are high. But the one that really impressed me the most was Facebook. 49% of your residents said they'd used Facebook within the last week. Not just are on Facebook, but have actually used it. Another 1 in 8 have actually used Twitter in the last week. So I know this is a lot of information to share with you today in a short period of time. I just want to end by saying, great job. You're really to be commended. You didn't get here by accident, and the fact that I've now worked with you for 8 years and you continue to get better is what amazes me. When I first presented in 2004, we thought you were at the top of the hill and how are you going to get higher? Then you went higher in 2008 and you've set an even higher standard now. So the fact that you're interacting with your community, you're identifying your community's needs and responding to those needs is really to be commended. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Colleagues, that was amazing. Lots and lots of information. Mr. Teata, you have a question?
Well, you could hear a pin drop as you were making that presentation. It's good to see you again. I can't believe it's already 4 years ago you were here last time. Oh, my goodness. It seems but thank you for that information. Is this available online, or will there be hard copies and all that good stuff? All online. Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll look forward to. You're right. It's just a fast presentation. It's hard to dive into a lot of the points there are subject to a lot of analysis and stuff. But overall, you're indicating. So we're out of the what was it, 1,600 communities you evaluate? I think.
Over 500 now. I've lost track, but we used to actually have the exact number, but it's grown so quickly.
So
you're in the top 5% of all communities.
That's what I wanted to confirm. Right.
And just to put that in perspective, some of the communities include like Coral Springs. It's the only city in the country to get the Malcolm Baldrige Award. So, I mean, there's some very high performers in that database. In fact, one of the reasons we started doing national surveying is communities that did surveys tended to be higher performers. So when we first started doing the survey, we compared everybody who did the survey against everybody else, but we found out that that was a little biased because all the people doing the survey were scoring better than the average community. So we now actually do our own independent surveying across the country so we can compare you to true national norms in each of the areas.
Do you have folks contacting you questioning how you got the data, that maybe there may be major flaws and mistakes you've made?
I get it all the time, but I'm a professional. I do this pretty regularly, and our work's been validated by a number of sources. So I think you can have a lot of confidence that it's good data.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Teata. Mr. Facet?
Yeah, thank you. Actually, now that you've been here, I remember you from 4 years ago. It sort of all came back to me. I think where I would focus really is getting something from the manager after this, letting the staff digest it, and of course we'll look at it because some of us will be interested in digging a little in ourselves. But the areas, where we could see improvement, you always wonder, what do you think it is? Why? The traffic flow, the roads. They don't really surprise me. It's very similar to 4 years ago, really. So it'll be helpful to better understand what is meant by that, because even the term traffic flow, we assume it's cars, but now we have a complete streets program, which brings bicycles and car share, and we talk about the pedestrian. So to better understand, we're in a transition, in fact, in this community, as are many others. The council government's just adopted a broad complete streets program, or TPB did, for the region as a model, as a goal. So I expect the transition to a complete streets program, thinking about things, thinking about parking a little differently, does create a little uncertainty, a little questioning, and I think that's normal. But I think we do need to better try to ourselves understand what is meant by that, how we can help people understand it, how we can do a better job. And the maintenance, again, sitting here trying to think why that's so low or lower than we'd like. Clearly, when you have construction, that's a piece of it. I mean, we happen to be a community fortunate to have construction, so some of it is around construction sites, and some of it is that for years, during the difficult times, we were doing less on road maintenance. So in the last year or two, we've begun to put some more money in. So I think thinking through exactly what we can do in those two areas, but even understanding better what traffic flow means. And maybe I'll leave it with you. Do you have any better explanation of how that might have been interpreted or how it was phrased?
And one of the things is you have to look at kind of the intent for the survey. It's much like going to your doctor and getting a physical. There's lots of things that can be checked. You might take blood work and they test all sorts of things. And you could potentially individually assess every single area that the county provides services in. This is to help you figure out, well, traffic flow, we probably have to look at that a little more closely. We probably do need to understand streets a little bit better, but for the other 7 areas or 8 areas that were assessed in that category, you can probably live 4 years without doing a lot in those areas. And so I would encourage you to explore some of those areas that have been identified as high priorities a little bit more in depth. Traffic flow is not typically a surprise. Most communities, it has to do with car travel, but because you're a unique community and you're looking at some other areas, there may be other issues involved, and it'd be good for you to understand that, and the survey suggests that it's important to understand that. And so that's how I would kind of use the survey as much more as an indicator of general health, but to really understand what to do, you should do additional research and investigation.
Thanks.
Mrs. Garvey?
Well, I want to thank you. I'm one of the new people here, so I can't take credit for any of this, except for maybe a little bit on the school side, which rated quite well. But I have one smaller question and then a larger one. On traffic calming, you had that was a dissatisfaction. I've actually recently been campaigning, so this all actually makes sense to me. What you're telling is what I heard when I was out there. But I'm not sure on the speed humps and the traffic calming, were those people that were dissatisfied, was it because they wanted more or because they wanted less? Because when I was out there, I was hearing both.
Yeah, I think there's a couple things. I can't really tell you from looking at that. That's actually a unique question for Arlington County. I think it's an important issue that you're looking at. I think the first step to do is we take a look at how different groups responded. In other words, is it an issue because of age? Is it an issue based on where the folks live? That may give you some indicators. But I think one of the things is you'll want to take a look at that a little more closely, to really understand it. We don't know from this survey what the interpretation is, but we do know it's an issue. And so this suggests that further explanation or further exploration in what the terminology means would be important.
Great, well, that's good to know. I suspect we're going to find both, which is going to make it hard to do. And then just kudos to the manager and our staff. I mean, this is incredible. It's really amazing. And I know you're going to be digesting and reporting, and I don't know how you're going to be processing it, but I feel like we ought to send a big Valentine to our staff. I mean, it's incredible what this kind, and people work really hard. And the nice thing about these surveys is it validates the work they're doing, because sometimes people work really hard and you don't realize what a good job you're doing. And I think it's really important to have that feedback. So thank you for the survey, and thanks for all the good work. And obviously, we're in Arlington. We're going to always want to keep getting better, which gets tougher every time. But this is just really very incredible. Thank you.
I was really struck by the fact that when you look demographically, you achieved a mix that was awfully close to the census, which, given our complexity, is actually kind of tricky to get there. Is there anything that sort of sticks out in your mind where there were groups who were really quite different from what the overall norm was?
It really depends on the issue. As a general rule, most groups the levels of satisfaction are about the same. On some issues, people with lower income are concerned about fees and prices and things like that, more so than people who have higher incomes. Interestingly, in many issues, the folks who don't speak English or the folks who aren't originally from the area give their county higher ratings. And that's not that unusual, and it sort of makes sense. If you've come from another country and you're used to lower levels of service and you show up in Arlington County, you're likely to be impressed. And what we found in other communities where we have high percentages of foreign-born residents, that typically during the first couple years, if we ask them how long they've lived in the community, the folks who were born overseas who have been here 2 years or less generally give much better ratings than people who have been from the United States their whole life. However, once they've been here 10 to 20 years, their expectations become just like everyone else's. So yeah, there are specific issues. It really depends, but there's not one group that's much more or much less satisfied. Tonight I'm going to be doing some additional analysis. There's a place group that I'm going to be meeting with in the morning, so I'm going to try to do some interpretation to better understand some of the driving factors behind perceptions of community engagement and transparency and decision making, and I'm going to share that with the group in the morning.
Good. I think we'll all be interested in that, actually, since that's something the board's kind of taken on as a task. Are there any other questions? Thank you so much for coming. Oh, Madam Manager.
Yeah, I just wanted to say a couple things just to address one of the questions I think Mr. Facette had. We do a debriefing with each director and each of their management teams on their area so that every department gets the more in-depth analysis and can get into the questions a little bit deeper to understand the nuances, particularly in their areas, because I think it is important for us to better understand where to do it. Where to put the emphasis in the next 4 years, as well as every day, kind of thinking about how we redo or relook at things. I mean, this is an incredible achievement, but really is a partnership with the board's priorities and putting the funding where it can go. with the staff that carries it out every day that is just amazing, and how grateful we are as a community that we're able to be in this position. I mean, really, when you think about where we are, that's a great place to be. So thank you, and we'll continue to do some more work on this.
Thanks very much.